came after the death of Joshua, and the people of Israel asked God, who will take the lead in going up against the Canaanites to fight them? And God said, Judah will go. I've given the land to him. The men of Judah said to those of their brother Simeon, go with us to our territory and we'll fight the Canaanites. Then we'll go with you to your territory. And Simeon went with them. So Judah went up. God gave them the Canaanites and the Perizzites. They defeated them at Bezek, 10 military units. They caught up with my master Bezek there and fought him. They smashed the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My master Bezek ran, but they gave chase and caught him. They cut off his thumbs and big toes. My master Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to crawl under my table scavenging. Now God has done to me what I did to them. They brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. The people of Judah attacked and captured Jerusalem, subduing the city by sword and then sending it up in flames. After that, they had gone down to fight the Canaanites who were living in the hill country, the Negev, and the foothills. Judah had gone on to the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba, and brought Sheshai, Ahanim, and Talmai to their knees. From there they had marched against the population of Debir. Debir used to be called Kiriath Sefer. Caleb had said, whoever attacks Kiriath Sefer and takes it, I'll give my daughter Esau to him as his wife. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it, so Caleb gave him his daughter Esau as his wife. When she arrived, she got him to ask for farmland from their father. As she dismounted from their donkey, Caleb said to her, what would you like? She said, give me a marriage gift. You've given me desert land and give me pools of water. And he gave her the upper and lower pools. The people of Hobab, the Kenite, Moses' relative, went up with the people of Judah from the city of palms to the wilderness of Judah at the descent of Arad. They settled down there with the Amalekites. The people of Judah went with their kin to the Simeonites and struck the Canaanites who lived in Zephah. They carried out the holy curse and named the city Cursed Town. That's terrible. Wow. Where do you live? Cursed Town. But Judah didn't manage to capture Gaza, Ashkelon, and Ekron with their territories. God was certainly with Judah in that they took over the hill country, but they couldn't oust the people on the plain because they had iron chariots. They gave Hebron to Caleb as Moses had directed. Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak. But the people of Benjamin couldn't get rid of the Jebusites living in Jerusalem. Benjamites and Jebusites live side by side in Jerusalem to this day. The house of Joseph went up to attack Bethel. God was with them. Joseph sent out spies to look over the place. Bethel used to be known as Luz. The spies saw a man leaving the city and said to him, show us a way into the city and we'll treat you well. The man showed them a way in. They killed everyone in the city but the man and his family. The man went to the Hittite country and built a city. He named it Luz. That's its name to this day. But Manasseh never managed to drive out Beth-tan, Tanakh, Dor, Ebleam, and Megiddo with their territories. The Canaanites dug in their heels and wouldn't budge. When Israel became stronger, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but they never got rid of them. Neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. The Canaanites stuck it out and lived there with them. Nor did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites in Kitron and Nahalal. They kept living there, but they were put to forced labor. Nor did Asher drive out the people of Akko, Sidon, Alab, Akzib, Helpah, Ephah, and Rehob. Asher went ahead and settled down with the Canaanites since they could not get rid of them. Wow. Naphtali fared no better. They couldn't drive out the people of Beth-Shemesh or Beth-Anah, so they just moved in and lived with them. Wow. This they did, though, put them to forced labor. The Amorites pushed the people of Dan up into the hills and wouldn't let them down on the plains. The Amorites stubbornly continued to live in Mount Heriz, Ajalon, and Shalbim. But when the house of Joseph got the upper hand, they were put to forced labor. The Amorite border extended from Scorpion's Pass and Selah upward. Judges chapter 2. God's angel went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you out of Egypt. I led you out to the land that I promised to your fathers and said, I'll never break my covenant with you, never. And you're never to make a covenant with the people who live in this land. Tear down their altars, but you haven't obeyed me. What is this you're doing? So now I'm telling you that I won't drive them out before you. They'll trip you up and their gods will become a trap. When God's angel had spoken these words to all the people of Israel, they cried out, oh, how they wept. They named the place Bochim, which means weepers, and there they sacrificed to God. After Joshua had dismissed them, the people of Israel went off to claim their allotted territories and take possession of the land. The people worshiped God throughout the lifetime of Joshua and the time of the leaders who survived him. Leaders who had been in all God's work and that he had done for Israel. Then Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of God, died. He was 110 years old. They buried him in his allotted inheritance at Timnath-Heres in the hills of Ephraim north of Mount Gaash. Eventually, that entire generation died and was buried. Then another generation grew up that didn't know anything of God or the work he had done for Israel. The people of Israel did evil in God's sight. They served Baal gods. They deserted God, the God of their parents who had led them out of Egypt. They took up with other gods, the people around them. They actually worshiped them. And oh, how they angered God as they worshiped the god Baal and goddess Astarte. God's anger was hot against Israel. He handed them off to plunderers who stripped them. He sold them cheap to enemies on all sides. They were helpless before their enemies. Every time they walked out the door, God was with them, but for evil, just as God had said, just as he had sworn he would do. They were in a bad way. But then God raised up judges who saved them from their plunderers. But they wouldn't listen to their judges. They prostituted themselves to other gods who worshiped them. They lost no time leaving the road walked by their parents, the road of obedience to God's commands. They refused to have anything to do with it. When God was setting up judges for them, he would be right there with the judge. He would save them from their enemies' oppression as long as the judge was alive. For God was moved to compassion when he heard their groaning because of those who afflicted and beat them. But when the judge died, the people went right back to the old ways. But even worse than their parents, running after other gods, serving and worshiping them. Stubborn as mules, they didn't drop a single evil practice. And God's anger blazed against Israel. He said, because these people have thrown out my covenant that I commanded their parents and haven't listened to me, I'm not driving out one more person from the nations that Joshua left behind when he died. I'll use them to test Israel and see whether they stay on God's road and walk down in it as their parents did. That's why God let those nations remain. He didn't drive them out or let Joshua get rid of them. Judges, chapter 3. These are the nations that God left there, using them to test the Israelites who had no experience in Canaanite wars. He did it to train the descendants of Israel, the ones who had no battle experience, in the art of war. He left the 5 Philistine tyrants, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites, living on Mount Lebanon from Mount Baal Hermon to Hamas Pass. They were there to test Israel to see whether they would obey God's commands that were given to their parents through Moses. But the people of Israel made themselves at home among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. They married their daughters and gave their own daughters to their sons in marriage, and they worshiped their gods. Othniel. The people of Israel did evil in God's sight. They forgot their God and worshiped the Baal gods and Asherah goddesses. God's hot anger blazed against Israel. He sold them off to Cushan-Rathaim, king of Aram-Naharaim. The people of Israel were in servitude to Cushan-Rathaim for 8 years. The people of Israel cried out to God, and God raised up a savior who rescued them, Caleb's nephew Othniel, son of his younger brother Kenaz. The Spirit of God came on him, and he rallied Israel. He went out to war, and God gave him Cushan-Rathaim, king of Aram-Naharaim. Othniel made short work of him. The land was quiet for 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. Ehud. But the people of Israel went back to doing evil in God's sight. So God made Eglon, king of Moab, a power against Israel because they did evil in God's sight. He recruited the Ammonites and Amalekites and went out and struck Israel. They took the city of palms. The people of Israel were in servitude to Eglon 14 years. The people of Israel cried out to God, and God raised up for them a savior, Ehud, son of Gerah, a Benjamite. He was left-handed. The people of Israel sent tribute to him, to Eglon, king of Moab. Ehud made himself a short two-edged sword and strapped it on his right thigh under his clothes. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Eglon was grossly fat. After Ehud finished presenting the tribute, he went a little way with the men who had carried it. But when he got as far as the stone images near Gilgal, he went back and said, I have a private message for you, O king. The king told his servants, leave. They all left. Ehud approached him. The king was now quite alone in his cool rooftop room and said, I have a word of God for you. Eglon stood up from his throne. Ehud reached with his left hand and took a sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's big belly. Not only the blade, but the hilt went in. The flat closed in over it so he couldn't pull it out. Ehud slipped out of the way of the porch and shut and locked the doors of the rooftop room behind him. Then he was gone. When the servants came, they saw the surprise that the doors to the rooftop room were locked. They said he's probably relieving himself in the restroom. They waited, and then they worried. No one was coming out of those locked doors. Finally, they got a key and unlocked them. There was their master, fallen on the floor dead. While they were standing around wondering what to do, Ehud was long gone. He got past the stone images and escaped to Sariah. When he got there, he sounded the trumpet on Mount Ephraim. The people of Israel came down from the hills and joined him. He took his place at their head. He said, follow me, for God has given your enemies, yes, Moab, to you. They went down after him and secured the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites. They let no one cross over. At that time, they struck down about 10 companies of Moabites, all of them well-fed and robust. Not one escaped. That day Moab was subdued under the hand of Israel. The land was quiet for 80 years. Shamgar. Shamgar, son of Anath, came after Ehud using a cattle prod. He killed 600 Philistines single-handed. He too saved Israel. Judges chapter 4, Deborah. The people of Israel kept right on doing evil in God's sight. With Ehud dead, God sold them off to Jabin, king of Canaan, who ruled from Hazar. Sisera, who lived in Hariash Hagamon, was the commander of this army. The people of Israel cried out to God because he had cruelly oppressed them and his 900 iron chariots for 20 years. Deborah was a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth. She was a judge over Israel at that time. She held court under Deborah's palm between Ramah and Bethel in the hills of Ephraim. The people of Israel went to her in matters of justice. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "It has become clear that God, the God of Israel, commands you, go to Mount Tabor and prepare for battle. Take 10 companies of soldiers from Naphtali and Zebulun. I'll take care of getting Sisera, the leader of Jabin's army, to the Kishon River with all his chariots and troops. And I'll make sure you win the battle." Barak said, "If you go with me, I'll go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." She said, "Of course I'll go with you. But understand that with an attitude like that, there'll be no glory in it for you. God will use a woman's hand to take care of Sisera." Deborah got ready and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali together at Kadesh. 10 companies of men followed him, and Deborah was with him. It happened that Heber the Kenite had parted company with the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' in-law. He was now living at Zaniam Oak near Kadesh. They told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Sisera immediately called up his chariots to the Kishon River, 900 iron chariots, along with all his troops who were there with him at Hariath Hogim. Deborah said to Barak, "Charge! This very day God has given you victory over Sisera. Isn't God marching before you?" Barak charged down the slopes of Mount Tabor, his 10 companies following him. God routed Sisera, all those chariots, all those troops before Barak. Sisera jumped out of his chariot and ran. Barak chased chariots and troops all the way to Horth-Gimmim. Sisera's entire fighting force was killed, not one man left. Meanwhile, Sisera, running for his life, headed for the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. Jabin, king of Hazor, and Heber the Kenite were on good terms with one another. Jael stepped out to meet Sisera and said, "Come on in, sir. Stay with me. Don't be afraid." So he went in with her into the tent. She covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please, a little water. I'm thirsty." She opened a bottle of milk, gave him a drink, and then covered him up again. He then said, "Stand at the tent flap. If anyone comes by and asks you, 'Is there anyone here?' tell him, 'No, not a soul.'" And while he was fast asleep from exhaustion, Jael, wife of Heber, took a tent peg and hammer, tiptoed toward him, and drove the tent peg through his temple all the way into the ground. He convulsed and died. Barak arrived in pursuit of Sisera. Jael went out to greet him. She said, "Come, I'll show you the man you're looking for." He went with her, and there he was, Sisera, stretched out dead with a tent peg through his temple. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the people of Israel. The people of Israel pressed harder and harder on Jabin, king of Canaan, until there was nothing left of him. Judges chapter 5. That day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. When they let down their hair in Israel, they let it blow wild in the wind. The people volunteered with abandon. Bless God. Hear, O kings, listen, O princes. To God, yes, God, I'll sing. Make music to God, to the God of Israel. God, when you left Seir, marched across the fields of Edom. Earthquake, yes, the skies poured rain. Oh, the clouds made rivers. Mountains leapt before God, Sinai God, before God, the God of Israel. In the time of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the time of Jael, public roads were abandoned. Travelers went back by back roads. Warriors became fat and sloppy. No fight left in them. Then you, Deborah, rose up. You got up, a mother in Israel. God chose new leaders, who then fought at the gates, and not a shield or spear to be seen among the 40 companies of Israel. Lift your hearts high, O Israel, with abandon, volunteering yourselves with the people. Bless God. You who ride on prized donkeys, comfortably mounted on blankets, and you walk down the roads, ponder a tent, gather at the town well, and listen to them sing, chanting the tale of God's victories, his victories accompanied in Israel. Then the people of God went down to the city gates. Wake up, Deborah. Wake up, sing a song. On your feet, Barak. Take your prisoners, son of Abinoam. Then the remnant went down to greet the brave ones. The people of God joined the mighty ones. The captains from Ephraim came to the valley. Behind you, Benjamin, with your troops. Captains marched down from Machir. From Zebulun, high-ranking leaders came down. Issachar's princes rallied to Deborah. Issachar stood fast with Barak, backing him up in the field of battle. But in Reuben's divisions, there was much second guessing. Why are all those campfire discussions? Diverted and distracted. Reuben's divisions couldn't make up their minds. Gilead played it safe across the Jordan. And Dan, why did he go off sailing? Asher kept his distance on the seacoast, safe and secure in his harbors. But Zebulun risked life and limb, defied death, as did Naphtali on the battle heights. The kings came, they fought. The kings of Canaan fought. At Tanakh they fought at Megiddo's brook, but they took no silver, no plunder. The stars in the sky joined the fight. From the courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The torrent attacked them, the torrent Kishon. Oh, you'll stomp on the necks of the strong. Then the hoofs of the horses pounded, charging, stampeding stallions. Curse me, Rose, says God's angel. Curse, double curse its people, because they didn't come when God needed them, didn't rally to God's side with valiant fighters. Most blessed of all women is Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. Most blessed of homemaking women. He asked for water, she brought milk. In a handsome bowl, she offered cream. She grabbed a tent peg in her left hand. With the right hand, she seized a hammer. She hammered Sisera. She smashed his head. She drove a hole through his temple. He slumped at her feet. He fell. He sprawled. He slumped at her feet. He fell, slumped, fallen, dead. Sisera's mother waited at the window, a weary, anxious watch. What's keeping his chariot? What delays his chariot's rumble? The wisest of her ladies in waiting answers, with calm, reassuring words. Don't you think they're busy at plunder, dividing up the loot? A girl, maybe two girls, for each man, and for Sarah, a bright silk shirt, a prize fancy silk shirt, and a colorful scarf. Make it 2 scarves to grace the neck of the plunderer. Thus may all God's enemies perish, while his lovers be like the unclouded sun. The land was quiet for 40 years. Judges chapter 6, Gideon. Yet again, the people of Israel went back to doing evil in God's sight. God put them under the domination of Midian for 7 years. Midian overpowered Israel. Because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves hideouts in the mountains, caves and forts. When Israel planted its crops, Midian and Amalek, the Easters, would invade them, camp in their fields, and destroy their crops all the way down to Gaza. They left nothing for them to leave on, neither sheep, nor ox, nor donkey. Bringing their cattle in their tents, they came in and took over like an invasion of locusts, and their camels past counting. They marched in and devastated the country. The people of Israel, reduced to grinding poverty by Midian, cried out to God for help. One time when the people of Israel had cried out to God because of Midian, God sent them a prophet with this message. God, the God of Israel, says, I delivered you from Egypt. I freed you from a life of slavery. I rescued you from Egypt's brutality and then from every oppressor. I pushed them out of your way and gave you their land. And I said, I am God, your God. Don't for a minute be afraid of the gods of the Amorites in whose land you're living. But you didn't listen to me. One day the angel of God came and sat down under an oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, whose son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress out of the sight of the Midianites. The angel of God appeared to him and said, God is with you, O mighty warrior. Gideon replied, with me, my master? If God is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the miracle wonders our parents and grandparents told us about, telling us, didn't God deliver us from Egypt? The fact is, God has nothing to do with us. He has turned us over to Midian. But God faced him directly. Go in the strength that is yours. Save Israel from Midian. Haven't I sent you? Gideon said to him, me, my master? How and with what could I ever save Israel? Look at me. My clan's the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the runt of the litter. God said to him, I'll be with you. Believe me, you'll defeat Midian as one man. Gideon said, if you're serious about this, do me a favor. Give me a sign to back up what you tell me. Don't leave until I come back and bring you my gift. He said, I'll wait till you get back. Gideon went and prepared a young goat and a huge amount of unraised bread. He used over half a bushel of flour. He put the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot and took them back under the shade of the oak tree for a sacred meal. The angel of God said to him, take the meat and unraised bread, place them on that rock, and pour the broth on them. Gideon did it. The angel of God stretched out the tip of the stick he was holding and touched the meat and the bread. Fire broke out of the rock and burned up the meat and bread while the angel of God slipped away out of sight. And Gideon knew that it was the angel of God. Gideon said, oh no, Master God, I've seen the angel of God face to face. But God reassured him, easy now, don't panic, you won't die. Then Gideon built an altar there to God and named it God's Peace. It is still called that at Ophrah of Abiezer. That night this happened. God said to him, take your father's 7 best year-old bull and the prime one. Tear down your father's Baal altar and chop down the Asherah fertility pole beside it. Then build an altar to God your God on the top of this hill. Take the prime bull and present it as a whole burnt offering using firewood from the Asherah pole that you cut down. Gideon selected 10 men from his servants and did exactly what God had told him. But because of his family and the people in the neighborhood, he was afraid to do it openly, so he did it that night. Early in the morning, the people in town were shocked to find Baal's altar torn down, the Asherah pole beside it chopped down, and the prime bull burning away on the altar that had been built. They kept asking, "Who did this?" Questions and more questions, and the answer. Gideon, son of Joash, did it. The men of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son, he must die," while he tore down the Baal altar and chopped down the Asherah tree. But Joash stood up to the crowd, pressing in on him. "Are you going to fight Baal's battles for him? Are you going to save him? Anyone who takes Baal's side will be dead by morning. If Baal is a god in fact, let him fight his own battles and defend his own altar." They nicknamed Gideon that day Jerubbaal because he had torn down the Baal altar. He said, let Baal fight his own battles. All the Midianites and the Amalekites, the Easterners, got together, crossed the river, and made camp in the valley of Jezreel. God's spirit came over Gideon. He blew his ram's horn trumpet, and the Abiezrites came out ready to follow him. He dispatched messengers all through Manasseh, calling them to the battle. Also to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, they all came. Gideon said to God, "If this is right, if you're using me to save Israel as you said, then look, I'm placing a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If dew is on the fleece only, but the floor is dry, then I know that you will use me to save Israel as you said." That's what happened. When he got up early the next morning, he wrung out the fleece, enough dew to fill a bowl with water. Then Gideon said to God, "Don't be impatient with me, but let me say one more thing. I want to try another time with the fleece. But this time, let the fleece stay dry while the dew drenches the ground." God made it happen that very night. Only the fleece was dry while the ground was wet with dew. This is the word